for authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Patria Patrick. And we're going to be discussing her new upcoming video, American Empire, An Act of Collective Madness, which is a pretty in-depth subject. And I think it's something that really needs to be spoken about. And it's, I think, the first time I've covered this on my show. Before we get started, however, I want to remind everybody that you can learn more about her by going to her website, www.americanempire.com, and I'm going to paste that link into the chat room. Also, for those of you that want to call in and ask questions, the number's 832-632-7904. And if y'all are listening on Pal Talk or somewhere else to the show, feel free to come to www.talknowradio.com and join us in the chat room over here. We would love to have you here and get some people in the chat room talking over here, because I get a lot more visitors in the archives than I do in the live chat, at least right now, while this here live traffic is building up, so we get lonely over here. If y'all care to join us, we'd appreciate it. Patria, I was telling you earlier on the phone when I was waiting for the show to start that I heard about you on Facebook. You've been doing a little bit of promoting over there. I love your images that you put up, and I love the presentation that you're giving for your show. How about we start this off by you telling a little something about yourself and what got you interested in doing this documentary?
Yes, Royce. I am a filmmaker, and I am very interested in watching a lot of the films that come out. And I have not seen this film being made. And that concerned me very much. I have children, and I thought, as I saw a lot of this information, I thought it would be fantastic to put it together, and it's sort of like a puzzle, put the pieces together so that it was an easy, understandable package. And what's going on in the world today can be very complicated, but it also can be very much simplified so that a child can understand it, a young adult. And those are the people who are going to be the new generation. And I think it's important they understand what has happened in the past and some of history and how it affects us today and how it will affect their future. So it was easy for me to put the film together. I just saw the opportunity and I grabbed it.
Okay. But I think I read on the website you've invested many years of research into this, haven't you?
Yes, it took a long time because there's a tangled web, and so it took me about 4 or 5 years to put the film together. In first research and putting a team together, and then actually going out and doing the physical shooting, getting the cast and the great cast we have, Vandana Shiva, John Perkins, Ed Griffin, John Robbins, Tarek Ali, who's fantastic. These people were spread all over the world, and so it took some time to get our schedules together and actually get them on film. But it all came together, and it seems like it was just meant to be.
Right.
Then I went ahead and spent the last bit of time editing, and that took a goodly sum, and it's expensive to do all this as well. So it ended up being a lot of labor of love. We ended up producing the film ourselves, which is pretty hard to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. I don't even know anything about that. I mean, what all it entails in that, but I can imagine it entails quite a bit, especially if you're not used to working with video equipment, carrying the equipment around, getting the angles you want to get, and, you know, exactly everything the way you want it. I'm pretty sure is a tedious task, in other words.
Well, it's also the process of onlining, and then if you do go to outside help, then you're at their mercy at what maybe their rules or restrictions or voice would be for your film. And so I didn't want someone saying, no, we don't want to say this, that's not safe, or we better pull back here because that's too much. And the film is not in any way anything like a conspiracy film, but it is a controversial subject matter, and we're living in it now. And I just want us to understand that it's a really straightforward film, that it's not Democrat, it's not Republican, it's about our constitutional rights and what we think we're doing for the rest of the world and what we're really doing for the rest of the world and ourselves and our country here. It really helps us to see our moral compass.
Right. Well, you know, you was mentioning the Constitution a minute ago, and this has been coming to my attention a lot over the last few years, that it seems like little bit by little bit, the Constitution is being changed and new things are being ratified into it or out of it, excuse me. And I'm kind of got a concern that eventually it's going to be kind of like ratified out of existence or morph into an entirely new creature.
I agree with you. And I think that every time something happens, a big disaster, let's say, 9/11, for example, they have these bills, like the bill, the Patriot Act, was ready and put in place immediately, and nobody read it. I think it's a 2,000-page document. And so little by little, whenever the opportunity arises, they take away our power and eliminate some of the parts of the Constitution that are very critical to our protection. Ben Franklin, he said, a man who gives up his liberty for security deserves neither. And that's what's happening to our Constitution, and we don't see it because, Royce, partly we're busy every day taking care of our kids, our jobs, trying to pay our taxes, and afford food and pay the bills, and it's just, and it, you know, by the time you get home, you want to relax and stop the world for a moment, and so it's real. It's
also not like the government will send out everybody an email and say, we want to put this in the Constitution, we want to take this out, let's get everybody to vote and broadcast to the world so everybody knows. It's almost like it's being done behind the scenes with the a little bit of the news being put out about it, if any, in other words. I mean, sure, they get some kind of publicity, but it's not exactly, if you ask me, far and widespread.
Well, exactly. You get very little of this on the media. The media is pretty much just now not journalism. I mean, if you want good journalism, you sort of have to look for it. People like you might have a great show where you can get some really good tidbits. And these are the key things that we have to search for, people like you that want to get what's actually happening out there. So I think there is some information, but it is so hard to come by. And the beauty about American Empire is it's put a lot of that together for you, because it's almost impossible to watch every documentary or to listen to every good radio show or even every one of your radio shows and then try to put it all together. So it's so nice when someone
gets them all consolidated into one piece.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that you can't. What's so exciting about it is this film makes it so that you could go off and say, okay, I'm really interested in about that part of it. Like, you could say, I'm really interested in what is going on with the banking industry and the Federal Reserve. I mean, how does that affect our lives? We don't really think about that. We go to the bank, but the bank is running, and the Federal Reserve are running the economy and running inflation, debt, credit, and interest rates. And they're making profit on everything we buy. Every time we turn around, our prices are going up, and we're not making more money as people in our jobs. Our jobs, and when we get a raise, does not ever match any quality to the rate of inflation and the whole way credit is run. Credit is, if you want to get into a most fascinating subject, it's the Federal Reserve and how that affects our every dollar. If you look on your dollar,
on the back of it, you got that pyramid?
Well, not even that. I mean, that's getting a little out there, but that's a whole subject matter. But just if you look at the dollar, take your dollar out and look, and it says it's a Federal Reserve note. Now that means that every dollar that is printed is coming through that Federal Reserve, and so they are getting interest on all dollars printed.
Now,
and I don't think most people know that, and it's very scary.
In a minute, I want to ask you a question for Cajun Ghost Hunter in the chat room, but I don't want to lose this here topic just yet. But he wanted me to ask you about Edward Snowden. But before we do, I'm telling you what it was about, so if it scrolls up, you can remind me. But what I've read, and according to what my study shows, is the Federal Reserve does not answer to anybody. It's a private entity that's, loosely, or I say loosely ran, but in other words, it has its own ability to run its own agendas, in other words. And yet, we're allowed this thing to continue. And as it's given to understand, Jefferson did not even want this implemented into action in the first place.
Jackson? Did you say Jackson?
I think it was Jackson, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. It was Jackson and Taft and many of the presidents down the line had known about this. Many of the congressmen, it's interesting, Congressman Lindbergh, who's the father of the famous aviator, Charles Lindbergh. Mm-hmm. His father was one of the men who was very, very against it, and they threw him out of office. He was ousted because he was voicing against this what was called back then the Aldrich Bill. And they were really against it. People really did not want that to happen. And at that time, there was a lot going on with, banking and credit that the government didn't want people to know about. And once the Federal Reserve there was a money trust going on, and it eventually is what turned into the Federal Reserve. And it was only supposed to go for 50 years, but even before that, when they did have a central bank, it was chartered for 20 years. This Federal Reserve, the central bank that we have now, we're in the 100th year anniversary of it this very year. It was started in 1913, and this is 2013. So I suppose some people are celebrating that, and
the people who's making the money.
Yeah, and it's not something. This is the very reason. This is why people need to see this film, because it very articulates even better than I can do here in this short time why we have inflation and how that's happening. And the debt. I'm not just talking about you going out and running your credit card up. I'm talking about the national debt. And you don't have any say in the national debt. You can't say, there really isn't a chance to vote on that. I mean, I'm sure if we got to, we'd say, hey, we don't really want to have a war and want to be spending money for we do big loans to the World Bank through the Federal Reserve, which might be things we would not agree to if we really knew what was behind it. Something as innocent as saying, well, okay, the World Bank wants to help build roads in you pick a country, some poor country, a third world country, and that sounds good. But what they're really doing is giving the money to these companies to build the roads, and they get the contracts, but it's helping the American companies and these international companies really take the resources from that country. And if you would ask the people who live there, they would say, no, we don't want our resources taken because we would like to use them and maybe market them ourselves back to you as opposed to having you come over here and just take them, such as food. That happens all the time, and we're going to countries in South America and just these countries are taken over for their food and for their resources by these international corporations. And our military bases back that, and our economy right now supports it because we end up buying all that food. It's a very evilly ugly web. Very, very ugly web. And if you understand how it works, you can start, even in your daily life, start to do things to pull out of it a little bit. And if we all understood it more, it's easier to battle. Right now we're battling something we can just sort of complain about it. We can't even battle it because we don't really know how to pull together. We just know we're all sort of frustrated about stuff that, high prices and different entities of how this, I would call it the American empire works. And so it affects us all. And if we understand what it is, it's much easier to deal with. And I think, to bring down. And that's something that can make us a beautiful country again and, better ideals and better for the whole earth. As America goes, so goes the world. And so we're trying to Americanize everybody, and that might not be the right way to go. I think we're going to find that other peoples in other countries have systems that work for them. I'm not talking about some dictatorship or something, but a lot of things going on, coup d'etats and many things, Royce, that, sometimes at this point right now, we are so in the point of having few jobs here and so many sick people and, the whole thing. I think we really need to just look at our own country for a while and get our health back here.
Well, listen, in the chat room, Cajun Ghost Hunter was asking if you think Edward Snowden has jeopardized our security, or has he enhanced our liberty by his illegal disclosures?
This is the case of the NSA?
Yeah, the one that turned whistleblower and he went on the run?
It's this. It's hard to say if it's a particular case on this gentleman. Nobody really knows if it's a setup or, if he's really just
info agent or a
but
or deliberately.
In general, I think more power to him. I think the government should be invisible. We pay for the government, and right now we are locked out of it, and it's turned around and it's bossing us, and the whole pyramid is turned upside down. We used to have the power, and when George Washington was around, you could go to the White House and chat with him if you wanted to. It wasn't a big deal. Now it's like a whole different thing, and it's just so out of control, and it looks so complicated.
You have to have a special security pass just to get into the White House.
Yeah, it's very hard to go there. I've been outside of it, but and there's cameras all pointing at you. The point is we need visibility with our government, and we have had good people that were trying to expose things, even in the government themselves, and they've been thrown out and muffled, and it's just not what we want as people. We want the invisibility. We want our people that we are paying for to be there to give us our money's worth. They get a lot of money, and they get a lot of clerks and things too. And so they shouldn't be in a position. They shouldn't be able to be bought off so easily, and they are in many respects. It's not a good thing. So yeah, I think that no matter what, this gentleman is at least bringing this issue to light, that this kind of thing is probably happening.
Right.
And in more ways than one, it's across the board. There's all kinds of whistleblowing. And people like Julian Assange, and I just recently saw a documentary out on him that was putting him down, and it takes a lot to stand up, and it's the people that do that are going to be the George Washingtons of our day. I don't know who they are yet, but we do need these kind of people to get our country back. You know, when our country first started, we were under British rule, and we were paying taxes to Britain, and we were a British colony. And one day, some people
there
got
are
up
those
and
that would say we still are under British rule.
Well, that's it. We right now at this point, it doesn't have to be British, but we're under the empire rule. We are not using our constitution, and we're not enforcing that, and we can't do it. We've lost the power. I mean, the military and the government are so powerful that people are afraid to speak out, and this for the very reasons. Like if you do, you have to be extradited and leave the country, and it's awful. And we need those people again to stand up. This is the new time, the new spring, whatever you want to call it. And I think that people right now are just tired of it going on and being out of their control and being so complicated and being so far removed from them. And whether Edward is right or not, the case needs to be looked at and brought out into the open, and more of these things need to be exposed.
Right. Okay. Now, another question was, do you think that when we don't have enough money to afford Obamacare and general living expenses, that the economy will go into deflation?
Well, I think all kinds of things can happen right now just because of the way that they're continually printing money. And it is going to, I see it as we're going off a cliff right now. This Federal Reserve note that I was speaking of, when they need money, when they wanted to pay the banks in 2008, they didn't just go into their savings and pay them. They just printed up a bunch more money, which made our money worth less. That word, worth less. And prices went up, and that's how we got screwed. Many of us lost our homes. Many of us couldn't afford the homes anymore, and even the homes we had, you could see the prices of things for the house, the water, trash bills, all that kind of stuff. Sanitation, all that. All the things that we need to live, all those prices went up. And so it doesn't really matter I don't think it's one issue, Royce. I don't think it's one little thing that, Obamacare or this or that. I think it's the whole thing of stopping and looking at if they're going to continue to keep printing money and we're going to keep an economy that our Constitution was not, we have an economy right now. Our Constitution is not based on the writings of that. Our whole economy, our whole money system, the way we're just allowing the Federal Reserve to keep printing dollars, will print us, they'll spend us. It's like you can't, if you're drunk and you think, well, I can drink myself sober, you can't spend yourself out of debt, and that's what's going on. That's the real issue.
Well, the thought had occurred to me that since money seems to be at the root of all of this here, that if the American public, or even the any public anywhere, could go back to the old ways of gardening their own food and maybe go with a vegetarian diet, so they're not feeding money into the meat markets or the butchers, making their own clothes, anything they could do that would put money in their pocket they're not spending out on, but at the same time rob money from the system because it wouldn't be, spending it into it, would have to have enough people did it and did enough of it, have an effect on the economy in one way or another, wouldn't it?
Well, you don't even have to go that far. I mean, that's great. If everybody was doing that, it would pull the rug out under them. And I say right now, there's a lot of people in apartments and they're working 2 jobs, some of them 3. They don't have time to make their own clothes and grow their own food. But that's why I put this movie out there, because there are other things you can do. And if you can't do them all, but maybe your neighbor can do some other ones you can't do, or maybe it's not your exact neighbors, but other communities. It's all about getting the community power back. And one of the interesting things, Royce, is if you look back in World War II, when there was the war and people were starving and they were eating wallpaper, and even in France, I mean, it was just very hard to get food. People were, somebody gave you a piece of fruit. It was or some coffee or some sugar. It was a gift. And they learned in that experience to this day to never not be growing food locally. And that's our thing here, is that they've tricked us, and all of our food now is owned by corporations, grown by corporations, trucked by corporations, shipped by corporations, and also the price is regulated by corporations. And at that rate, if we had a problem, even if you had a problem in your area, let's say here, we're in California, I could have a big earthquake, but let's say in your area, if there was some major thing happened and you had a major power outage, or let's say there's just the worst scenario, the people who own the food companies decided, hey, we just want to raise prices, and they could get you by that. But if just food in general wasn't coming to your area, where would you, in 3 days, you would have no food on the shelves. And what that's done to our country is made us unsustainable. And unsustainable, I'm saying, means we're out of practice of growing our own food and collecting our own water. Or at least we don't even know where our water comes from in most of the cases. It's all on an electronic grid, and they can turn that grid off anytime they wanted to.
Right. Well, see, this also puts us in more danger, too. But before we get to that, I want to remind everybody that you can go to her website, www.americanempiredocumentary.com, and learn a little bit more. And also it has links to where you can purchase the video. And if you want to scroll down below the chat room where you see her description at, you'll see that I've also got a link going to Amazon where you get the video that way. And I'll be moving this to the archives most likely tomorrow unless I get really tied up, but definitely over the next couple of days in case I do. I usually don't, but I like to always say that just in case. You know how that goes. Make sure you stop by and take care of that for her. Don't forget the call-in number is 832-632-7904. And back to the subject at hand, there was another question, there was something I was just fixing to say a minute ago. Where were we at again? Because I lost my place.
We were talking about, should people start trying to grow their own food, or what can they do? I think this film is so important because you walk away and you see the problems and you see what you can do about it, how you can be involved, and you can decide what you can do, how much you can do. You feel empowered. And there's a lot to be said for us getting our communities back and in community level. I think one of the most interesting things right now is that's happening is the smart meters and the smart grid, and nobody's aware about it. I urge people to go look that up.
Cajun Ghost Hunter in the chat room mentioned something that I think you may or may not have it mentioned in your film that I think is a great idea. This is something a company I used to work for tried to.
for authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and joining me today is going to be Patria Patrick, and we're going to be discussing her new upcoming video, American Empire, An Act of Collective Madness, which is a pretty in-depth subject, and I think it's something that really needs to be spoken about, and it's, I think, the first time I've covered this on my show. Before we get started, however, I want to remind everybody, Patria, I was telling you earlier on the phone when I was waiting for the show to start that I heard about you on Facebook. You've been doing a little bit of promoting over there. I love your images that you put up, and I love the presentation that you're giving for your show. How about we start this off by you telling a little something about yourself and what got you interested in doing this documentary?
Yes, Royce. I am a filmmaker, and I am very interested in watching a lot of the films that come out. And I have not seen this film being made. And that concerned me very much. I have children, and I thought, as I saw a lot of this information, I thought it would be fantastic to put it together, and it's sort of like a puzzle, put the pieces together so that it was an easy, understandable package. And what's going on in the world today can be very complicated, but it also can be very much simplified so that a child can understand it, a young adult. And those are the people who are going to be the new generation. And I think it's important they understand what has happened in the past and some of history and how it affects us today and how it will affect their future. So it was easy for me to put the film together. I just saw the opportunity and I grabbed it.
Okay. But I think I read on the website you've invested many years of research into this, haven't you?
Yes, it took a long time because there's the tangled web, and so it took me about 4 or 5 years to put the film together. In first research and putting a team together, and then actually going out and doing the physical shooting, getting the cast and the great cast we have, Vandana Shiva, John Perkins, Ed Griffin, John Robbins, Tarek Ali, who's fantastic. These people were spread all over the world, and so it took some time to get our schedules together and actually get them on film. But it all came together, and it seems like it was just meant to be.
Right.
Then I went ahead and spent the last bit of time editing, and that took a goodly sum, and it's expensive to do all.
That you can learn more about her by going to her website, www.americanempire.com, and I'm going to paste that link into the chat room. Also, for those of you that want to call in and ask questions, the number's 832-632-7904. And if y'all are listening on Pal Talk or somewhere else to the show, feel free to come to www.talknowradio.com and join us in the chat room over here. We would love to have you here and get some people in the chat room talking over here, because I get a lot more visitors in the archives than I do in the live chat, at least right now, while this here live traffic is building up. So we get lonely over here. If y'all care to join us, we'd appreciate it.